You may be thinking, Christian, isn't the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 open beta this weekend? Now would be a great time to do a weekly waypoint in it. Yes, I also had that thought. Here's a condensed 30 seconds of me trying to install it. So yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of A Weekly Waypoint, the show where I talk about my week and the things that interest me. And if you missed that in the grand skipping of time, basically I accidentally installed it to my external storage, and when I tried to stop it from installing on my external storage, Xbox just went, Today, we're not just playing Halo Infinite, we are also playing Halo Master Chief Collection. You might be thinking, Christian, what a fun way to mix things up. Yes, it was definitely intentional. I definitely didn't spend over an hour trying to get any kind of decent gameplay. Today's Weekly Waypoint has been slightly frustrating to record, dear viewer, but you're here, and that's all that matters now. Before we go on, I will just admit, though, that I was trying to listen to a podcast while I was recording gameplay, which is probably why I didn't have the best situational awareness. At least in the Halo Infinite games I recorded, I kind of gave that up when I went over to Master Chief Collection. But hey, normally I play Halo just fine while I'm listening to a podcast, so who knows what went wrong. So the pattern we normally fall into in these videos is I talk about what I've been playing recently, and then something that's kind of cropped up in recent months is I talk about the comic books I've been reading lately. But today I want to do that in a slightly different order, and by slightly different I mean let's reverse that shit, because I've had quite a comic-y week. First of all, on the Marvel side, to give you some indication of what's to come, I have got to the point in the Marvel reading order where it's like, hey, go read Spider-Man 2099, and I go, fucking gladly, because I have been fascinated by the concept of Spider-Man 2099, and I'm actually surprised it took me this long to get around to reading about him. Like, I might have pursued him outside of a Spider-Man reading order, just like see what he's like by himself. Because for those of you who aren't aware, Spider-Man 2099 is a cyberpunk offshoot spin-off series set in the future of the Marvel universe. I don't know if it's a different, like, multiverse parallel universe thing, or if it is literally just, I think it is meant to be literally just the future, but wouldn't be surprised if they retconned it at some point. But yes, in 2099, Spider-Man is Miguel O'Hara, and I'm about 6 issues in. I'm not very far in, but it is really fucking cool. It's a nice change of pace. Compared to the kind of villain of the week stuff. It feels a lot more like Ultimate Spider-Man, which would come out like 10 years afterwards, or maybe more like 15 years afterwards, in that it's more of like a linear narrative of, like, there's still like different things happening in different issues, but it definitely feels more like a book from front to back through multiple issues, instead of like, okay, and then in this issue it's this villain, and then in the next issue it's this other villain, or they might do it for 3 issues instead. This feels a lot more like Ultimate Spider-Man, in which it's telling one long story where characters kind of flow in and out of a narrative more naturally. So that's really cool to see. The art style is also quite different. I'm not crazy about the art style. It can be a little bit difficult to discern what's going on some of the time, but I think it does suit the aesthetic, so I can't really complain. It's a visually busy panel usually, and yeah, I'm just excited to see where this goes. One thing I don't like about Miguel O'Hara's Spider-Man is the kind of like cobweb cloak he's got behind him that's all tattered. I think it just looks shit. I hope they get rid of it at some point. But I don't know if they do. I'm trying to remember in Spider-Verse when, in the post-credit scene, when we see Spider-Man 2099 for the first time, if he has that or not. It's a little bit like original Spider-Man's webbing under the armpits, which comes and goes through various iterations. I'm not crazy about that either, if we're being honest. Also, before we get too far away from it, because I don't believe I talked about it last week, because I hadn't got there yet, because last week I had just been introduced to Venom. This week, before the Spider-Man 2099 stuff, I was introduced to Carnage, and that was a pretty fun storyline too. Now, I did say on the Marvel side of things, which means that yes, I finally caved and got a DC... what's it fucking called? DC Universe Infinite subscription, because I really like DC as well, and I've never gotten into the comic side of things. That's a lie. I just told a big fat stinky lie. I have a massive wall of comics behind me of DC things. I have some New 52 stuff I bought separately, and I have something that Eagle Moss did a while ago called The Legend of Batman, or The Legacy of Batman, where it's a whole bunch of paperback editions of just various Batman stories that are meant to be the best ones ever told. And truth be told, I kind of regret doing that now, because I could just get that all for a low monthly price on DC Universe Infinite. Maybe I'll sell them one day. They're mostly unread. But yeah, I've never done the subscription service thing, mostly because it wasn't fucking available in the UK till April. I've mentioned this before in a previous Weekly Waypoint. I kept checking, and what's really annoying is I last checked like a week before it came out, and if they had announced that it was coming to the UK at a set date, I'd missed it, but it felt like it just fucking dropped. And I found out like 2 months later that for the first month, if you if you did the annual thing, it was like 35 quid instead of 55 quid. So that's annoying that I missed out on that window. But yeah, I'm just on a free trial right now. I would rather do it yearly, but I might have to do it monthly for a couple of months. But I'm gonna try and trade it off, so I think I'm like 6 months into my Marvel yearly sub, so if I can do it like every 6 months, pay for my comic sub, and it encompasses both Marvel and DC, that'd be great. Now, I've obviously held off doing this for a while. It's kind of hard to justify getting another comic subscription when Marvel's comics, I've got enough to tide me over for fucking years and years to come with that service. But I just couldn't stop my stupid, distractible brain. It's not a stupid brain. I'm going to be nice about myself. I couldn't stop my easily distracted brain, that's nicer, from wondering what was going on the DC side of the fence. And I've checked it out a bit. The first thing I read was, it turns out the people who did Batman the Animated Series went on to do a small comic run within that universe. And one of the free comics they have on the app, before you even get to like a free trial or anything, it's literally just there for anyone to read without putting card details in or anything, is a 60-page special featuring Harley Quinn and her origin story, and a little bit more fleshing out her character and stuff like that. And I've actually never watched Batman the Animated Series. The Batman series I grew up with was called The Batman, and it was the animated series that came after Batman the Animated Series. Are you keeping up? But I very much do want to watch Batman the Animated Series. One frustration of mine is how difficult it is to find these cartoon series streaming online, at least officially. So it's really cool to see that the animated series has its own comic run. It's like 30 or 40 comics, it's not crazy. And then they use the same kind of name of that series for a different run of an artist and writer, and they say it's inspired by that universe, and you're like, oh, it's not really the same thing then, is it? But yeah, I read that just to test out the functionality of the app, because the app has some middling reviews, but it seems to be working okay for me. It does get stuck loading pages way more often than the Marvel one does, but usually they pop in like 4 or 5 seconds in, and if not, you can just go back, zoom in on a panel, go to the next page and zoom in mode, and usually it works. I haven't had any problems there. And yeah, I decided to start going by, you know how I constantly plug comicbookreadingorders.com, because that's the Spider-Man reading order I'm currently going by. I decided to give the Batman reading order a go. I've been on the fence about which character to start with, but if I'm being perfectly honest, big Batman fan, so I'm like, sure, let's just ignore the fact that I've got like I don't know how many, 40 or 50 Batman comics behind me that I've not even read, and just read them on this service instead, because I'm an idiot. Because I'm easily distractible and would like to have some spaces filled in that those physical paperbacks might not have in them. Self-positivity. So I read the first Detective Comics comic where Batman shows up, and that is a comic written in the 1940s is what that is. It is, it's a thing. It's got historical value, but it's also, I mean, it's like 7 pages long if I remember. But then I read the very first issue of Batman, and that is a slog. I kind of skipped most of it, but I read the Joker bit. It's weird. It's like 3 different comics in one. But it's like the first issue, so maybe it's just like a compilation of comics that were printed in like a newspaper or some shit. I don't know how this worked. But it was interesting to see the original 1940 edition of Batman and the Joker and stuff. I always thought the kind of campy TV show Batman series that was on in like the 60s was like a weird take on Batman, but actually it's quite faithful to the original depiction. But as I started going through that reading order, which mercifully jumps from the super old stuff to like the 1970s very quickly, unfortunately they are actually missing a few issues in that reading order. So some of the stuff between that and like Ra's al Ghul's daughter showing up for the first time, there's a couple of issues which just aren't on the service, which is a shame. But it's a younger service than Marvel Unlimited, and they do have a massive amount of comics available, so I'm sure I can forgive them for missing the odd like comic from the 50s. If I encounter any more notorious gaps, I will be sure to talk about it here in a weekly Waypoint. But after a couple of pre-crisis, oh boy, that's a whole thing. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the DC comic universe, it's kind of more divided into eras than the Marvel comic universe is, in that there's Crisis on Infinite Earths is the big event thing that kills all the multiverses, and then there's just a single universe for a while, and then there's Infinite Crisis, not to be confused with the aforementioned Crisis on Infinite Earths, which opens up the multiverse again, and then something else happens with Flashpoint, which turns it into the New 52, and then something else happens, which turns it into Rebirth, and then I think something else happens, and there's like a new thing called like DC Infinite or something. I'm still new to this. It's a lot to take in, I know, but that's pretty much my understanding of the timeline of DC. And I was like, okay, I'll give Pre-Crisis a go. And that's the comics I just listed, the ones I read. I read like the introduction of Talia al Ghul, and then I read another one where Ra's al Ghul was like testing Batman to see if he was worthy of his daughter and stuff like this. And I'm just kind of like, these comics are kind of, I've read better. So I decided to jump ahead to post-crisis era. But, and by the way, if I don't like post-crisis era, I'll jump ahead to New 52, which I know I like because I've actually read a lot of Batman New 52 already. But I decided to set the stage first, so all this to say, I am reading Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it's probably not the best place to start as a new DC comic reader, because I don't recognise 70% of the characters, and it doesn't help when you've got like characters from different timelines and different universes working together. But I'm having a fun time with it. I'm like part 8 out of 12 at the minute, and I find it very interesting that it released in the same year that Marvel released Secret Wars. Because they're both kind of out there, outer space stories. The original Secret Wars didn't shake up their multiverse, by the way. That was like the 2005 version or whatever. I am, if you cannot tell, deep into comics right now. I feel like every year I make myself even nerdier than I was the previous year. But yeah, I'm reading Crisis on Infinite Earths right now, and then I can kind of use that as a starting point to read Batman, Superman, The Flash, and then I am interested in Green Lantern. I know nothing about Green Lantern, so there might be some fun Green Lantern stuff in there, I don't know. Yeah, I just tend to like DC's world and characters a lot. But I do think Marvel still does a better job of humanizing them outside of their superhero identities, at least from what I've read so far. And that leaves us a grand old 2-3 minutes to talk about what I played in video games this week. I started to play Fallout 4 again, which is like my third attempt to get into the game, and I'm not sure if I'm going to continue, purely because I started getting bad dreams about post-apocalyptic life. I actually really like Fallout 4. I think it's a really good game, but it's so effective at its sad post-apocalyptic atmosphere that it plays on, I guess, some anxieties I have in my brain about that kind of stuff actually happening in the next few decades. I mean, I don't normally get bad dreams, and I've had like 4 bad dreams this week, and I think it's because I've been playing Fallout 4 and reading Spider-Man 2099, which isn't a post-apocalyptic future, but it is a dystopian capitalist nightmare of a future. So that's another reason, by the way, why I decided to take up reading DC Comics, because I was like, I could use a distraction in my fictional worlds right now. But I've kind of put Fallout 4 on hold for that reason. I also tried Hardspace Shipbreaker and put that on hold because it was too effective at conveying the fantasy of working for a shit corporation. And I don't really need to live that fantasy because it's not a fantasy, it's what I'm living. I'm continuing my playthrough of Skyrim. That's always fun. Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 4 launched, and I am actually a huge fan of this Battle Pass. The last one didn't grab me so much, I did make my way through it to get Darth Vader, but I wasn't a huge fan of most of the skins in the past. They're fine. I've got some of them as loadouts, but, you know, they're fine. But this one, I want pretty much every skin I've seen. I think they look super cool. I gave Deathloop a try. I think it's a pretty fun game, but it's not really something I feel like playing too much more of at this particular moment. I think Reese would love it, and I feel bad because Reese can't run it on his PC. I also tried Proteus, which surprisingly came out. I don't know if I just missed the news that it was hitting full release, but I've been waiting for it to hit full release before playing it to get achievements and stuff. And that game is Doom. Stylistically, it's got its own kind of style going on, but gameplay-wise, that game is Doom, and I don't mind that because Doom fucking rocks. I mean, it has its own kind of unique guns and stuff and enemies, but it's Doom. And if that wasn't clear, that is a recommendation. Go play Proteus. Also, last week we played You Suck at Parking here on the Weekly Waypoint. I got all the multiplayer achievements in that game, so I'm pretty happy with that. Like, the single player stuff is a challenge that I look forward to tackling. The only real thing I need to worry about is I hate when games do like a battle pass achievement because it means you need to play a lot within a set period of time instead of just doing it at your own pace. Don't make battle pass levels achievements, please. But that's my only real complaint there. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it. I've been kind of dipping my toe into lots of games this week because... Wait, did I talk about Metal Hellsinger this week or last week? Well, Metal Hellsinger also came out and is fucking rad as fuck, and you should fucking play it. It deserves all those F words. But yeah, there's so much awesome stuff coming out on Game Pass at the minute. I'm holding off on Slime Rancher 2 purely because there's so much stuff, and that's coming out on Game Preview, so I'll wait for full release. But yeah, that about does it. Thank you for listening to this extremely nerdy episode, and I'll see you next week.